Well, in the Eastern Cape, a mother has allegedly killed herself and her 3 children in what's believed to have been a poverty situation or frustration that stemmed from extreme poverty. Let's talk about this further with the Teddy Bear Clinic Director, Dr. Shaheda Omar. Dr. Omar, very good evening to you. I'm grateful for your time. How common or uncommon is it to hear of this sort of thing where a mother, especially as a primary caregiver, would not just end her life, but the lives of her children because of poverty and how difficult life is for them?
So it's not a common phenomenon, but we are seeing this occurring more frequently, recently in the past few years, where we're seeing mothers committing maternal filicide and, of course, taking their own lives, so killing their children and killing themselves, committing suicide, complete suicide. And some of the reasons, the risk factors are where, if we look at the different forms of filicide being committed, it's your altruistic filicide, where often the mother finds herself in a situation where she's trapped, there's no escape, and she feels that it's in the best interest, in their best welfare of the children and herself to take all their lives because there's no better way out of the situation. So it's the desperation, feeling absolutely hopeless, helpless, powerless, and completely frustrated with no access and availability to resources. And what we are seeing is that certainly mothers who have no support structures, they are living in isolation, no access to any kind of financial support and emotional support, and not being in a position to reach out for that mental health support, we actually see that this is occurring more frequently and definitely more concerning, more alarming, because instead of celebrating and commemorating Women's Day, we are actually faced with the tragic loss of a family of 3 young children and a mother.
What then is the best way to intervene, to help in such situations?
Well, you raise a very important question, and certainly on different levels, this is a systemic issue because we know unemployment, poverty, lack of skill, lack of opportunities, and lack of access to resources like support structures in terms of whether it's civil society, social development, healthcare facilities, psychosocial support. These are all things that have to be factored into providing community awareness and support. So more conscientizing, awareness raising, but also making it more easy and easily accessible and available to people who are in need. Because if they have any kind of challenges and they know that these resources are places they could reach out to and feel safe and secure, and that they could actually trust these resources, I think that is the way to go. That a lot more awareness raising needs to be done by government, by civil society, by faith-based organizations across the spectrum. Everybody needs to actually reach out. We know there are places like Lifeline, SADC, the South African Depression and Anxiety Group, where people can phone at the push of a button and receive that kind of support. So that is something that we need to actually make people on the ground aware of. It's not something that is implicit in people's daily lives where they know that at the push of a button there will be that kind of support. But even in terms of your basic needs, food and shelter, the grants, government grants, as social development, we also need to make those kind of things more easily available and accessible to prevent this kind of violence, to prevent this kind of tragic loss of families and lives.
What I'm hearing there also, Dr. Omar, is that we need to make resources more available, more accessible, especially because this happened, for example, in a hut in a rural part of Butterworth in the Eastern Cape. So people there, for example, may not have, for example, something that we take for granted. Not everyone has airtime loaded onto their phone at any time.
Indeed.
Or has access to the internet where they could look up a number if they were in need of someone to speak to in a moment where they feel they are in crisis.
Indeed, and I think that you've raised a very important thing here, the zero-rated calls, but also emergency places where they could actually use within their immediate vicinity environments where they could make an emergency call. even at your nearest police stations or healthcare facility, there should be emergency resources made available to those in dire need. At the push of a button, a life could be saved. And this is in the rural areas, they are hardest hit because of the lack of resources. And that's another important thing, that we need to look into the rural areas because they are so disadvantaged and they're short of any kind of support. And this is where we find ourselves challenged, and we find that more and more trauma, the victimization, whether it's domestic violence, whether it's homicide, infanticide, neonaticide, whatever. I mean, we're finding that the maternal filicide, we cannot blame the mother. We cannot condone what has happened, but at the same time, one needs to contextualize it and look at the flaws, the systemic flaws, where the systems have failed this mother and this family. And if we don't take action now, we will continue facing this kind of challenge in the future.
You also have to wonder, we speak a great deal about what parents in distress can do in these situations where they feel overwhelmed. But when you look at the ages of these children, for example, the two were found on a bed in the house were aged 8 and the other 5. The eldest child was 14. And you wonder what children in that situation would have been able to do. How would children even be able to see that this was now a situation that was becoming life-threatening? Who do they reach out to? How do they even contextualize and explain the fact that their mother is either going through something or, in fact, that there's an emergency?
Indeed, I think if we just think of the last horrific and horrifying moments that these children were going through, because it's inherent in a family, it's implicit that the mother is the maternal figure, the carer, the nurturer, the one that takes responsibility and provides not only financial or economic support, but the emotional support, the loving, the care, and the desperation that this mother resorted to desperate and drastic measures. And the children, having seen that and having gone through these last few moments in their lives, witnessing that, one cannot begin to even think or even make sense or even understand what could have gone through their minds through those last few moments in their lives. It is so sad, it is so tragic that a family, that innocent children who were powerless, defenseless, and absolutely not in a position to protect or save themselves, or even reach out for help or cry out for any kind of support or intervention.
Dr. Shaheda Omar, thank you so much for your time on News of Prime.